All right, let's dive into this. Today we're exploring ego evolution and
Okay.
kind of like figuring out, the whys and the hows of developing a really healthy ego.
Mm.
We'll unpack, what it actually does, how
Yeah.
we can kind of cultivate it, and even some of the problems that can come up along the way.
Yeah,
So are you ready for this?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Okay, great.
So ego evolution really emphasizes this idea that the ego, which a lot of people think of as just being arrogant,
Right.
is actually like the very center of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's really our identity and our, the center of our decision making.
Okay.
And it can even be thought of as like a protector.
A protector.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about it like that before.
Yeah.
Like how does it protect us?
It's almost like a filter for all the stuff around us in the world.
Okay.
It helps us kind of go through our experiences and process information.
Mm.
And then ultimately, it allows us to make choices that feel right for who we are. A well-developed ego also creates those healthy boundaries.
Right.
It allows us to stand up for what we need,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives us this really important shield against things that could hurt us.
So a strong ego isn't about just being selfish.
Right.
It's more about having a good sense of who you are,
Exactly.
which helps us deal with the world, in a better way.
Yeah, and one thing that was interesting in ego evolution was how important a healthy ego is for good relationships.
Okay.
Because when we don't have a strong sense of self,
Right.
we tend to come into relationships, needing too much or feeling insecure.
Yeah.
And that leads to bad dynamics.
So how do we actually go about building this healthy ego? I know ego evolution talks a lot about honesty.
Definitely honesty is like the very foundation,
Yeah.
of trust and being believable.
Right.
So when we're honest, both with ourselves and other people,
Yeah.
we make this solid base for growth in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, ego evolution even suggests this really interesting tool. It says to create like a written code of ethics to help guide your choices and actions.
Wow. That's pretty hands-on. I
Yeah.
like that, setting clear guidelines.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious about courage.
Okay.
Where does that fit in with all this?
The connection between honesty and courage is really interesting.
Okay.
Ego evolution kind of reframes what we think of as courage.
Okay.
It's not just about, doing brave things.
Right.
It's about acting from your heart,
Mm-hmm.
from a place of real spirit.
Okay.
So this means checking out new ideas,
Hmm.
challenging the status quo, and most importantly, saying what you really believe even when it's tough.
So it's less about grand gestures and more about being real and pushing past those fears we all have?
Exactly. Dr. Susan David, who
Mm.
wrote the book,
Mm.
really emphasizes that fear is often the biggest thing blocking courage.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And she encourages us to notice those fears without letting them stop us.
Okay.
It's about moving through fear and taking action even when we don't know what's going to happen.
It's like that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so pushing through.
Yeah, and what's really cool is how ego evolution connects courage to personal growth.
Oh,
By stepping out of those comfort zones and taking on challenges, we naturally learn, evolve, and become more resilient.
this is giving me like a whole new way of thinking about courage.
It is a new way of thinking
Yes.
about it.
Okay, but what about helping others? Doesn't that contradict the idea of building a strong ego?
Hmm.
Because, it seems kind of focused on yourself.
That's actually a really common misconception that ego evolution tries to debunk.
Mm.
It actually says that building a stronger ego can involve a lot of helping others.
Okay.
By helping others, we build our character, develop empathy, and contribute to something bigger than just us.
That is an interesting twist.
It is.
It seems counterintuitive at first.
Yeah.
How does focusing on others make our own sense of self stronger?
It's all about the impact of what we do.
Hmm.
When we genuinely help other people, we feel a strong sense of purpose and fulfillment. And that, in turn, boosts our self-esteem and reinforces our values.
Right.
It's like a cycle of good stuff.
It's all coming together now.
Yeah.
Honesty, courage, service. They all work together to build this strong, healthy ego that helps us engage with life more fully.
Yeah, and ego evolution defines engagement as this kind of constant hunger for new experiences and challenges.
Okay.
It warns against getting complacent and just staying in our comfort zones.
So it's about pushing ourselves beyond those comfort zones, constantly looking for growth and new experiences.
Yes, you got it. Dr. David really drives home the point that we should go after what we're passionate about.
Yeah.
Embrace feeling uncomfortable because it helps us grow
Mm-hmm.
and keep searching for new goals and opportunities.
Okay.
That's what keeps us vibrant and engaged and really connected to life.
This is all great, but let's flip things around for a second.
Okay.
What happens when the ego is damaged?
Yeah.
What are the risks involved with that?
So ego evolution outlines two main dangers. The first is not doing anything to fix a damaged ego.
Right.
It just festers and affects our thoughts, behaviors, and our overall well-being.
And the second danger?
Trying to fix it in unhealthy ways.
Okay.
Like depending too much on what other people think, or trying to make our ego bigger by being arrogant and putting others down.
Yeah.
These are ultimately things that sabotage us.
So a damaged ego can lead to both withdrawal and arrogance.
Exactly.
To two very different things.
Yeah, it is interesting. The book contrasts these negative things with the qualities of a healthy ego.
Okay.
Things like self-acceptance, resilience, and being able to handle other people's opinions without feeling personally intact.
It's almost like holding up a mirror to your ego and asking, is this really helping me?
That's a really great way to put it.
Yeah.
Ego evolution is ultimately arguing that how we see ourselves is crucial for the quality of our lives.
And that takes us back to the idea of the ego as our protector. By building a healthy ego, we're basically giving ourselves the tools we need to handle life's challenges and create a more fulfilling experience overall.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember this isn't something passive.
Okay.
It needs conscious effort, a willingness to look at our thoughts and actions, and a dedication to personal growth.
So it's a journey of self-discovery and evolution that we control with our choices and actions.
Exactly. Ego evolution stresses that we are the ones responsible for how our ego develops.
Okay.
We can't expect other people to fix it for us.
We have to do the work.
Yeah, it's an inside job for sure.
That's why understanding these different elements, honesty, courage, service, engagement, is so important.
Yeah.
They're like the foundation of a healthy ego, the tools we need to build a strong sense of self.
I love that analogy.
Thanks.
Just like building a house, building a healthy ego takes time, consistent effort, and of course the right materials.
Makes sense.
And just like a building can have weak spots, we need to watch out for the things that can sabotage our efforts to build a strong ego.
Okay, so we've laid out the framework, identified the important parts.
Yeah.
But what about those potential problems? What are some of the things that can trip us up on this journey?
Ego evolution points out several common traps that we often fall into.
Okay.
Things like negative self-talk, comparing ourselves to other people all the time, and looking for validation from outside sources instead of from within.
So it's about recognizing those patterns and consciously choosing to break free from them, right? Shifting from self-doubt to self-acceptance.
Exactly. It's about moving away from fear and towards courage.
Okay.
Trusting our own judgment instead of always needing other people's approval.
Yeah.
Those are the changes that lead to real growth.
This all makes sense, but I have to admit it can feel a little overwhelming sometimes. Like, where do we even start with all of this?
That's a great question, and Ego Evolution offers some helpful guidance on how to get started. The first step is developing self-awareness.
Okay.
Take some time to really think about your own ego. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are your core values and beliefs? How do you usually respond to challenges?
It's like taking an inventory of our current ego state.
Yeah.
Doing a self-audit.
Exactly. And once you have a better understanding of where you're at, you can start to pinpoint specific areas you want to work on.
Right.
Maybe you need to get better at being honest with yourself and others.
Yeah.
Or maybe you need to develop more courage to chase those dreams you've had for a long time.
This reminds me of the idea of a growth mindset.
Yes.
Embracing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow instead of seeing them as threats.
Absolutely. A growth mindset is super important for ego evolution.
I agree.
It lets us see setbacks as temporary and see potential where other people might see limitations. It's about enjoying the journey and understanding that growth is a continuous process.
We've covered so much.
We have
the importance of honesty, courage, service engagement, and self-awareness.
Right.
Is there anything else that stands out to you from ego evolution?
What really hits home for me is the emphasis on personal responsibility. Dr. David makes it super clear that building a healthy ego is totally up to us.
We can't outsource it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making a choice to invest in ourselves and our own growth.
Right. And it's not a quick fix.
Definitely not.
It's a continuous process of growth and evolution.
Exactly. It's about constantly fine-tuning our sense of self throughout our lives.
Right.
It's about embracing the journey and enjoying the ride, even the bumps along the way.
I feel like I have a whole new perspective on the ego
Yeah.
and its role in creating a fulfilling life.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And remember, ego evolution provides a great framework, but the real work starts when we take this knowledge and apply it to our own lives and experiences.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I'd love to leave our listener with something practical they can do.
Given what we've discussed, what's one action step they can take this week to start nurturing a healthier ego?
That's a great question. I would encourage your listener to pick one area where they want to see growth.
Okay.
It could be anything from being more assertive to setting healthier boundaries to finally going after that dream they've always had.
Got it. So once they've picked that area, what then?
Take one small step towards that goal.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be huge or overwhelming.
Okay.
It could be as simple as having an honest conversation with someone, saying no to something you don't want to do, or even just spending 15 minutes working on a creative project.
Small steps, consistent action, and a commitment to growth.
I love it.
And remember, progress over perfection.
Okay.
Don't get discouraged by slip-ups or setbacks.
Right.
Just keep moving forward one step at a time. You've got this.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
Good.
I feel like we've just started to scratch the surface of this topic, but it's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. That's the great thing about these deep dives.
Yeah.
They make us curious, get the conversation going, and encourage us to explore more. Who knows? Maybe this is just the start of a lifelong journey of ego evolution for our listeners.
Yeah.
It certainly has been for me.
And for me as well. We'll pick up our exploration of ego evolution in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Until then, stay curious and keep those growth mindsets engaged.
Awesome. Picking up where we left off last time, it's clear that this healthy ego thing, it's not like a one-time thing.
Right.
It's a constant process. Ego evolution, really emphasizes that.
Yeah, it's like gardening.
Yeah.
We need to constantly be pulling out those bad thought patterns and nurturing those good qualities.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Weeding out the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And nurturing the good stuff.
Exactly.
Speaking of weeding out the negative, Dr. David, she spends a good chunk of ego evolution talking about those pitfalls of a damaged ego.
Right, we touched on that a bit in the last part, talking about the two big dangers, ignoring a damaged ego and trying to fix it in unhealthy ways.
Right.
But let's go deeper into what happens because of those pitfalls. What does a damaged ego actually look like in real life?
Well, the book gives some pretty clear examples.
Yeah.
When you ignore damaged ego, it can show up as being super critical of yourself, constantly needing other people to tell you you're okay,
right,
or not being able to stand up for what you need.
Yeah.
It can also make you withdraw, isolate yourself, and just feel blah.
So a damaged ego can swing both ways then.
It can.
Towards feeling worthless and towards thinking you're better than everyone else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you try to fix a damaged ego in unhealthy ways, it usually comes out as arrogance, blaming other people, and always needing to prove you're the best.
It's like trying to cover up that lack of self-esteem by putting others down or trying to get validation through achievements.
Exactly. Dr. David actually uses the term ego fragility to describe this. It's like being easily threatened by criticism or setbacks.
And that fragility, as she calls it, makes it really hard to have healthy relationships, go after our goals, and just handle life's challenges, with grace and resilience.
Totally. Ego evolution emphasizes that a healthy ego is all about self-acceptance, resilience, and a strong sense of self that doesn't fall apart when things get tough.
That's powerful.
It is.
It's about finding that inner strength to handle those tough times without losing sight of your own value.
Yeah, and that inner strength is exactly what ego evolution is trying to help us build.
Okay.
It gives us a plan for turning a damaged ego into a healthy one.
Right.
One that can embrace growth and connection and lead to a more fulfilling life.
So given all the ways a damaged ego can show up, how do we even recognize it in ourselves? Are there any warning signs?
Ego evolution actually offers some helpful self-assessment questions to help us spot those potential weak areas.
Okay.
For example, it asks us to think about how we usually react to criticism. Do we get defensive and lash out?
Right.
Or do we see it as a chance to learn and grow?
That's a good starting point for looking inward.
It is.
It forces us to check our automatic responses and see if they're really helpful.
Right. The book also encourages us to pay attention to that inner voice.
Yeah.
Is it full of negative self-talk and those limiting beliefs? Or is it more about self-compassion and believing in our potential?
So it's about being aware of those subconscious patterns that shape how we think and feel and act.
Exactly. And once we've figured out what those patterns are,
Okay.
ego evolution gives us practical ways to change them.
Okay. How so?
Well, for instance, if we notice we're always criticizing ourselves, we can try to replace those negative thoughts with more positive ones.
It's like retraining our inner critic to be more supportive.
Exactly. It's about learning to be kind to ourselves.
Okay.
Understanding that we're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
And treating ourselves with the same kindness we would give a good friend.
This is really empowering.
It is.
It reminds us that we have the power to choose our thoughts and ultimately shape how we experience the world.
Absolutely. And that's why ego evolution is so helpful. It doesn't just tell us why a healthy ego is important.
Right.
It actually gives us real tools and strategies for building one.
So let's go back to those key elements we talked about before.
Okay.
Honesty, courage, service, and engagement. How do these specifically help to heal a damaged ego and create a stronger sense of self?
Well, ego evolution emphasizes that honesty is crucial for breaking free from those self-deception patterns.
Okay.
You know, the ones that keep a damaged ego going.
Right.
It's about admitting our weaknesses, owning our mistakes, and being real with ourselves about what we need and want.
So honesty is the basis for self-awareness and real growth.
Exactly.
If we don't have it, we're building on shaky ground.
Right.
Okay, what about courage?
Courage, as Dr. David explains, is essential for stepping outside our comfort zones,
Right.
challenging those limiting beliefs, and taking risks even when fear wants to hold us back.
It's about facing our fears head on and knowing that real growth often comes after we get uncomfortable.
Exactly. And service.
Okay.
That's a powerful way to fight that self-centeredness that can come with a damaged ego.
Right.
It shifts our focus outward, reminding us that we're part of something bigger and that what we do can have a positive impact on the world.
It's about finding that purpose and meaning that goes beyond just our own needs.
Exactly. And lastly, engagement, as Dr. David defines it.
Yeah.
It's about having a curious and open mind, actively seeking out new experiences,
Okay.
and embracing those challenges that life throws our way.
So it's about choosing growth over staying stuck.
Yeah.
Embracing the uncomfortable as a way to learn and constantly pushing ourselves to evolve and expand.
You got it.
It's about living a life that is fulfilling and meaningful, one that involves constant learning growth and a deep connection with ourselves and the world around us.
You nailed it. Ego evolution is an invitation to go on this transformative journey of self-discovery and growth.
Right.
It's a call to embrace the power of our minds to shape our experiences and create a life that is fulfilling and true to our deepest values.
This has been such a rich conversation.
It has.
I'm feeling inspired to take a closer look at my own ego and see where I might need to do some weeding and nurturing.
That's great.
But before we wrap up this part,
Yeah.
is there anything else that stands out to you from ego evolution?
What really grabs me is how much Dr. David stresses the connection between our inner world and the world around us.
Okay.
You know, she argues that our ego isn't this isolated thing.
Right.
It's always interacting with and being shaped by our relationships, experiences, and the bigger social context.
It makes sense. Our ego doesn't exist in a bubble. It's always changing in response to the world around us.
Exactly. And this shows how important it is to create an environment that supports healthy ego development.
Okay.
So surrounding ourselves with good influences, finding relationships that are based on mutual respect and support,
Right.
and actively engaging with the world in a way that aligns with our values and goals.
It's about recognizing that our personal growth is tied to the social and cultural contexts we live in.
Yeah.
And making choices that support our journey towards a healthier, more resilient ego.
Exactly. Ego evolution reminds us that we have the power to shape not just our own inner world,
Right.
but also to contribute to a world that is more compassionate, understanding, and supportive for everyone.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the ego
Yeah, have been.
and how it shapes a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, but it's given me so much to think about and apply to my own life.
Me too. That's the beauty of these deep dives.
It is.
They spark curiosity, get us talking, and encourage us to keep exploring.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe this is just the beginning of a lifelong journey of ego evolution for our listeners.
Right.
It has definitely been for me.
And for me as well. We'll continue exploring ego evolution in the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Until then, stay curious and keep those growth mindsets engaged. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into ego evolution, I'm really struck by how much we've covered.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
It has. From understanding like what the ego even does to unpacking, what a damaged ego looks like and exploring all those elements of its evolution, it's been quite the journey.
It really has. And, ego evolution gives us such a complete framework for understanding this part of ourselves.
It does. And I think what sticks with me most is the emphasis on taking responsibility. Dr. David is really clear that, building a healthy ego, it's an inside job.
Yeah, it is.
It's a process that requires, effort and a willingness to challenge our own patterns.
Absolutely. It's not about looking for validation from outside or quick fixes.
Right.
It's about really understanding ourselves.
Recognizing those limiting beliefs and choosing to change them.
Yeah. And it's not about achieving some perfect ego state either.
Right. It's an ongoing process.
Right.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey, seeing challenges as chances to learn, and approaching our own growth with curiosity and compassion.
And speaking of that journey, we've talked about the key elements that contribute to a healthy ego.
Right.
Honesty, courage, service, and engagement.
Mm-hmm.
But how do these principles actually work in real life? Can you give us some examples of how they might show up in everyday situations?
Sure. Let's take honesty, for instance.
Okay.
Imagine you're in a meeting at work.
Yeah.
And someone presents an idea that you just don't agree with. Honesty in that moment might mean, speaking up respectfully.
Okay.
Even if it means going against the flow, or maybe causing a little friction.
That takes courage, though, right? To stand up for what you believe in, especially when it feels uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Courage isn't about not having fear. It's about acting in line with your values, even when you're afraid. Maybe it means taking on a challenge that pushes you out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
speaking out against something that's wrong.
Or even just owning up to a mistake.
Okay, so what about service then?
Service can look like a lot of things.
Okay.
It might be volunteering for a cause you care about,
Yeah.
helping a friend who's struggling,
Right.
or just doing kind things in your everyday life. The important thing is that it shifts our focus outward,
Okay.
reminding us that our lives have meaning beyond just our own needs.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected and contributing to something bigger.
Exactly. And then there's engagement.
Right.
This is about actively seeking out new experiences,
Yeah.
learning new skills, and challenging ourselves to grow and evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's taking a class, traveling somewhere new, or even just having a deep conversation with someone who has different opinions than you.
So it's about approaching life with curiosity and openness, always trying to learn something new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we cultivate these things, honesty, courage, service, and engagement,
Yeah.
they all work together to build this strong, resilient, and authentic sense of self.
It's like weaving them all together to create a tapestry of a healthy ego,
I like that.
one that can handle all of life's ups and downs with grace, resilience, and a strong sense of purpose.
Beautifully put. And I think that's the core of what ecoevolution is all about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a destination, it's a journey.
A journey.
Yeah, it's about becoming more aware of who we are, challenging our limits, and embracing our full potential.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to thank you for sharing your insights.
Of course.
And helping us understand all the wisdom in ego evolution. This has been a really enlightening conversation.
It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy these deep dives, and I hope our listeners have gotten a lot out of this exploration as well.
And to our listeners, take what you've learned from this deep dive and apply it to your own lives. Think about those key principles we've talked about: honesty, courage, service, and engagement.
Right.
And think about how you can bring them into your daily life.
Mm-hmm.
Remember cultivating a healthy ego. It's a journey, and every step you take brings you closer to realizing your full potential. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep embracing that journey of ego evolution.